Change. Change is something that everyone goes through no matter what the time period it is or the day. Change will happen like it or not. The question is, why do people hate change? Let's break down on how change affects the brain. On a Harvard Business Review on why people hate change because they feel it is a loss of control. And change challenges our self-determination for potential change to come out of someone. Around the world, change is going on every second of every day of every hour. In 1954, Supreme Court case Brown v. Board of Education was a milestone for the civil rights movement. It helped equal rights as it broke down segregations for public schools. After the Supreme Court case, Brown v. Board case caused numbers of different school districts like Southern and border schools desegregations peacefully, while white residents defense and violent confrontations from other schools. By 1964, 10 years after Brown, the NAACP's focused legal campaigns have been transformed into a mass movement to eliminate all traces of institutionalized racism from American life. From 1954 to 1964, the civil rights movement was such a big change, so many people fought or joined them. Because it was a big change like the civil rights movement, it also allowed people like MLK and Rosa Parks to make a change in society. From 1956, the state of Alabama students burned desegregation legislatures to show that they don't like change. This relates with nowadays concepts of change from movements like LGBTQ community because they have made an impact on questioning the religious beliefs of cultures. People like Rosa Parks or MLK made an impact on the world to stop racism and to make black people equal to white people in the United States, to be united with one another than to be against each other. Imagine a world with perfect weather, perfect people, perfect house, perfect friends, and perfect life. I say this because there is no such thing as perfect. We can come close to perfect, but we cannot become perfect, as we use perfect as a way to judge someone if they seem to live the perfect life. But in reality, we don't live the perfect life. Instead, we live a stressful, time-consuming, confusing life that we spend creating for the next generations to experience, quote-unquote, the perfect life. Let's compare an apple picked off a perfect apple tree. When we see that apple, it looks perfect, almost perfect. But over the days of being that perfect apple, we see it change. That perfect apple that you saw was now a little bit brown, squishy almost. Then as more and more time comes, it becomes smelly and gross, and simply people throw it out and get an almost perfect apple once again. Well, that apple becomes fertilizer now that simply grows your almost perfect apples. I say this because that old apple is the people that grew that apple tree to create those almost perfect apples. And the next generation is supposed to create those almost perfect apples. But people put chemicals like pesticides and more chemicals in the fertilizer to create that better perfect apple, so they think. The apple tree becomes dry, starts to die with leaves slowly falling off. As more apples become gross with chemicals in them, making those apples not almost perfect but imperfect, begin to change those leaves that are the old way of living, mostly falling off to be consumed in the fertilizer to grow a dying apple tree. As the leaves on the apple tree begin to fall off, causing the history of those leaves to repeat, this example represents our country here in the United States by a lack of ownership to what people get away with. The change cannot happen when people use a non-natural product to grow an economy. And this is why people hate change, because people change the old way of living for people that they grew on that apple tree. That a study showed that the United States appears to be getting richer but not happier. Americans came in 18th place from the happy list down 4 places from last year. As the growth in wealth uproars the happiness in America, Americans aren't happy because change is happening. From abortion centers closing, Christianity and religious groups fighting the LGBTQ community because they challenge their faith in the Lord, that it's okay to change genders, to pretend that there's something that they're not. Change can't simply become okay for everyone. There has to be steps for change. And how the United States are using change, it'll tear a line in between our country decides that'll start a war representing those leaves that fell off of our perfect apple tree.